Perhaps you've heard stories about kids or adults who have gotten into trouble with the law because they illegally copied or downloaded music. There's been a lot of talk in the news about digital piracy and illegal downloading. You've also probably heard teachers talk about plagiarism, which is the practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as your own. What's the big deal? What is copyright? What does copyright have to do with you? Concerns about copyright are nothing new. Since ancient times, people have tried to protect their intellectual property. Do you know what intellectual property is? Intellectual property refers to creations of the mind that exist in fixed symbolic form. It can include books, movies, music, lyrics, paintings, photographs, images, websites, architecture, and other creative ideas. In other words, suppose you came up with an idea for a song. Then you worked hours and hours creating the lyrics. You write, scratch out, erase, rewrite, throw away, and rewrite for days, then weeks. Then you create the melody, sitting at your guitar for weeks. Finally, you've got it the way you want it. You've written your own song. You publish the lyrics on your blog and record the song on your own YouTube video. That song, if it's your original creation, is your intellectual property. It's the creation of your own mind, and it now exists in written, video, and audio forms. How would you like it if someone else stole your song, the exact lyrics and melody, made their own YouTube video that went viral, and then sold the song to a record company for thousands and thousands of dollars? You'd probably feel cheated because someone else stole the profits from your original creation. They stole your intellectual property without even giving you credit. Over 2,000 years ago, a number of contestants were disqualified from a poetry contest because of plagiarism. Stealing intellectual property is nothing new. In fact, in the late 1700s, Noah Webster wanted to protect the flow of money he received from the sale of his spelling book. He asked the government to create a law that would protect his book from being freely copied by others. This would ensure that people who wanted Webster's book would have to buy it. In 1787, the U.S. government formally built the idea of copyright into the U.S. Constitution. Here's what it said, quote, "The Congress shall have power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries." End quote. Notice that the original purpose of this copyright law was not solely to protect people's intellectual property. It was designed to encourage and foster the creation of culture, new ideas, art, technology, and other creations. And that's where things get complicated. Copyright is about balancing competing interests. On the one hand, people who create content or intellectual property sometimes want to profit from their own creations. That's understandable since some content takes a lot of time and effort to create. And at the very least, most people want credit for their work. They don't like the idea of someone else ripping off their idea and claiming it for their own. On the other hand, in the words of one ancient writer, there's nothing new under the sun. New ideas, new creations of the mind almost always build on previous work. And here's the rub. How can anyone build new ideas and new creations of the mind without access to what's already out there? If everything is strictly copyrighted and costs money to get, only the rich folks will be able to afford to get it and to be in a good spot to create new culture. This is why the U.S. Constitution's original statement about copyright is so important. The purpose was to encourage and foster the creation of culture, new ideas, new works of art, new writings, new inventions, and other creations. But today, copyright law has developed into a sometimes confusing pile of legal technicalities. A work created by an individual author is protected by copyright for 70 years after the author's death. Copyright applies to any kind of intellectual property. So here's the question. How do people create new ideas, new art, new creations of the mind if almost everything is locked up under strict copyright laws? There are several ways you can still create and build on other people's copyrighted material while still being ethical and obeying the law. First, you need to understand that copyright law has an important exemption. It's called fair use. The fair use doctrine is found in Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. This law allows people to use copyrighted material in specific situations for specific purposes. Some of these purposes include education, news reporting, scholarship, research, or criticism. Courts consider 4 factors in determining fair use. The first factor is called purpose of use. That is, why is the copyrighted material being used? What's the purpose? Here are some purposes that are generally allowed under fair use. Teaching, including multiple copies for classroom use. Research, scholarship. It matters if it's being used in the context of a non-profit educational institution. Other purposes include criticism, comment, news reporting, or if the use is transformative or productive, that is, if you're changing the original content for a new use. Also, parody is included. Or, if the material is being used in a restrictive setting, it's usually okay to use. For example, if it's being used for students in a specific small class or another appropriate group. On the other hand, the following purposes are usually not allowed under fair use. Commercial activity, profiting from the use, entertainment, bad faith behavior, or using material without giving credit to the original author. The second factor to consider when determining fair use is the nature of the copyrighted work. That is, what kind of work is being copied. If it's a published work, factual or nonfiction based, or important to a favored educational objective, it's probably okay to use. On the other hand, if it's an unpublished work, a highly creative work like art, music, novels, films, or plays, or fiction, then it's probably not okay to use the copyrighted material. The third factor to consider when determining fair use is the amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to the original work. That is, how much and what portion of the original work is being used. If it's a small quantity, a portion that's not central or significant to the entire work, or if the amount is appropriate for a favored educational purpose, then it's probably okay to use. But if it's a large portion, or the whole work is used, or if the portion used is central to or at the heart of the work, then it's probably not okay to use. The fourth and final factor to consider when determining fair use is the effect of the use on the market for the original. That is, how your use of the material will affect its place in the marketplace. If you own a lawfully purchased or acquired copy of the original work and you're only making one or a few copies, and if there is not significant effect on the market or potential market for the copyrighted work, and if there's not a similar product marketed by the copyright holder, or if there's a lack of licensing mechanism, then it's probably okay to use. On the other hand, if copying the work could replace the sale of the copyrighted material, or significantly impair the market or potential market for the copyrighted work, then it's probably not okay to copy the material. In other words, this final factor asks you to consider how copying a work might affect the market value of the product. Will you be stealing money in effect from the copyright owner by decreasing the profit they might make from their product? For example, if you made copyrighted material available on your website, people would be inclined to download the material from your website rather than purchase the material from the copyright owner. In effect, you've participated in theft by robbing the original producer from compensation for their work. So it's important that you understand fair use and these four factors, especially as you create your own personal projects, or even projects at school. Does this all sound a little complicated? Don't worry, you're not alone. However, there's good news. There's an easy way you can use other people's material in creative ways without violating copyright laws. It's called Creative Commons. What is Creative Commons? It's a place on the web where people voluntarily license their content so that they can freely share it with others. It's a place where people give you permission to use their work. It's also a place where you can freely share your work with others. If you haven't checked out Creative Commons, you're in for a great surprise. It's an amazing collection that grows by leaps and bounds every day. It's a huge treasury of materials, all kinds of materials, photos, images, music, videos, and other creative works. Here's how it works. First, go to search.creativecommons.org. You can search for many kinds of media on Creative Commons, and there are several different kinds of Creative Commons licenses. If you go to WeaverLearn.com and look at the micro lesson on copyright basics, you'll see a slideshow that includes a detailed description of each of these Creative Commons licenses. Basically, the licenses tell you how you are allowed to use the work. The broadest license, which includes tons of materials, is called attribution. This license allows you to use the material any way you'd like, as long as you credit the original source. Some licenses state that you can use the work, but not change it. Other licenses say you can use the material, but not make money from it. Just pay attention to the licenses and make sure you use your source in a way that is consistent with the Creative Commons license. It's really very simple and easy to use. Also, if you want to use music or video in a project, there are now many sites that include freely shared material. You can find a sampling of free materials at this web address on WeaverLearn.com. So, by respecting other people's intellectual property and by using Creative Commons, you can create all kinds of creative projects in ways that are safe, ethical, and legal. Have fun.